Okay, so we are in Ezekiel 47, the second half of that chapter, and God is dividing up the land within Israel. And in the last couple of verses of that chapter, he talks about what to do with the aliens. So, starting in verse 22, you shall divide it by lot for an inheritance among yourselves and among the aliens who stay in your midst, who bring forth sons in your midst, and they shall be to you as the native born among the sons of Israel. They shall be allotted an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel, and in the tribe with which the alien stays, there you shall give him his inheritance, declares the Lord. So it's really beautiful how, God from the very beginning has always desired all the nations to come to him. Israel was meant to be a beacon, a blessing to the world, an example of who God is, what he's like, how his ways are life-giving, so that the rest of the world would come to him and want to follow his ways. So these aliens that have come to Israel and want to live according to God's ways, want to worship him, want to be with his people, God considers part of his people, which is beautiful. And something that is worth pointing out is that the aliens here are people that want to follow God's ways. So, and the same rules apply to them. You know, when they come into that land, they are signing up to follow the same rules and regulations. And so if they do something that deserves the death penalty, they get the death penalty. And then they also get an inheritance. And so just the people that love God and want to be amongst his people, even when they were not born into Israel, God adopts them and considers them part of Israel, which is beautiful. He, even throughout the New Testament, it's more obvious where God accepts the Gentiles. And we talk about that often, how the Gentiles have been grafted in, but God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And even in the Old Testament, the people that were not born Israelites but wanted to be amongst his people were grafted in and got that same blessing. And so as an example, in Isaiah 56, starting in verse 6, also the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone who keeps from profaning my Sabbath and hold fast my covenant, even those I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all the peoples. The Lord God, who gathers the dispersed of Israel, declares, yet others I will gather to them, to those already gathered. So it just emphasizes again that God's desire is for all people of all nations to come and know him and be blessed to live in his ways. And something else that I thought interesting, which is another passage that deals with foreigners but is the opposite in some ways, is actually in Isaiah. Let me see where it was. Isaiah 14:1. It says, when the Lord will have compassion on Jacob again, and again choose Israel and settle them in their own land, then strangers will join them and attach themselves to the house of Jacob. The peoples will take them along and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them as an inheritance in the land of the Lord, as male servants and female servants, and they will take their captors captive and will rule over their oppressors. So this is actually a little bit different. It's another way of dealing with foreigners, but in this case, the foreigners are different. They are not people that are wanting to necessarily come and, or at least this is my understanding of it, that they're not people that are wanting to come and live according to God's ways necessarily, but they are actually people that were oppressing Israel. And when God brings Israel back together, these former oppressors will actually get a taste, a little bit of their own medicine, and they will be the servants of Israel, to Israel. And it says they will take their captors captive and will rule over their oppressors. So it's just interesting how, I mean, God looks at the intention of our heart and does not treat us all the same. He doesn't. When we are wanting to live according to His ways, and when we love Him and we're drawing near to Him, He welcomes us in and is like, yes, my child has repented, welcome to the family. And when we are not in that space, we're treated differently, and we get to choose which camp we are in. And so it was just beautiful to me to see how in Ezekiel, for these people that are not born as native Israelis, when they are wanting to live according to His ways, they are brought into the family and considered part of Israel, which means also, just relating it to a little bit of the immigration stuff in America. I mean, the people that are coming in, they are being held to the same standard and the same rules as the Israelis. So if they're breaking the rules that have the death penalty, for example, they are experiencing consequences of their actions. And within God's system, there was not a welfare system, really. If you didn't work, you don't eat. And the way that He set it up to take care of the poor was farmers would glean their field once and then leave whatever's left for the poor to go out and harvest themselves. So the poor were still working to get their food. They were not being given handouts. And so the way that, I mean, just so much in America needs reform. But the aliens that were coming to live amongst the Israelites, those who were coming were signing up to live according to God's ways, to worship Him, to be part of that community, be a blessing to society. They were not coming for the sake of breaking the rules or welfare or anything like that, but to actually be amongst God's people. And those who fell into the other camp of who were not wanting to follow God's ways, but were amongst the Israelites, were actually living as servants to the Israelites, and and they were now captive. They're in Isaiah. Their captors take their captors captive, and the Israelites will rule over their oppressors. So, so this is how God handles aliens amongst His people. He welcomes them. Anyone who wants to love God and follow His ways, God gladly welcomes them, brings them into the family, and says, you are mine, and there's an inheritance for you. So, it's beautiful.